What I've realized is that if you have an idea or a thought and it constantly comes back to you, you have to act on it. That's meant for you. When you're more in tune with yourself, you can feel where you need to go more easily. I think when I was at the most clear, the most opportunities were coming. When you're ready, things will come.
Your environment shapes your mindset, your habits, your opportunities, but it doesn't have to define your future. In this episode, I sit down with Matty Mills, a proud indigenous Australian TV presenter and storyteller, to explore how you can break free from limiting environments, take control of your path, and create a future on your own terms. Matty's journey from growing up in hardship and foster care to becoming a national voice in media proves that where you start doesn't determine where you go. He talks about overcoming self-doubt, taking action even when the odds are against you, and making bold choices that lead to drastic change. If you've ever felt trapped by your surroundings or just stuck in a cycle you want to break, this conversation will give you the tools and the mindset shifts you need to redefine your future on your own terms. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it. With the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew, so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss how to escape limiting environments and redefine your future. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Matty, so great to meet you, mate, and thank you for making the time to come on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat. I mean, the stuff that I've been seeing come from your podcast and your platform is super inspiring. So thanks for what you're putting out there.
Appreciate it, mate. No, well, same to you. And been super excited just to be able to learn more about you and have you on here. So I'm just going to jump in. Can you give our listeners, just so they can learn more about you, a bit of a background on yourself, what you're doing now, and essentially how you came to be where you are?
Yeah. So my name's Matty Mills. I'm a 29-year-old First Nations Australian. My tribe are the Kamilaroi tribe, which is in the northwest corner of New South Wales. My dad is Aboriginal and my mum is, white Australian. My dad grew up on a really small mission, Aboriginal mission outside of a town called Collarenebri, which is sort of 8 hours northwest of Sydney. He grew up with, in a segregated town, a town that was, it was a farming town, and my mum grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney. So I was born in the western suburbs of Sydney, and my mum and dad split at a really early age, and he sort of left my mum to, mother three young boys. She was a single mum. And when I was really young, so when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was told that my dad had passed away. And so I grew up with the belief that he had died. My mum went through a really tough addiction with drugs and alcohol abuse. I think she was really struggling with the concept of being a single mum and having to take on such, a difficult stage of her life as, a single mum of three young boys, and we were only 18 months apart. So she, went into the addiction pretty heavy, and we got taken off her and put into foster care. So we were split up as young brothers, and it was a really tough time for me as a young person, but a really positive thing came out of foster care, and it was the fact that the system, that took us actually ended up finding out that my dad was alive, and so they went and looked for my dad, and he didn't have a death certificate. That was the thing. So they told us 1 year into care that they thought he was alive and that they were going to try and find him. And this was just such like crazy news to us boys, because we always grew up with the belief that he had been, he had died and that he had passed away. And we even had like a yellow rose that we would, put in our garden, which symbolized dad. And we would always say, it's your turn to water the flower. And it was like this little symbol of our dad that we always felt like we had lost. Um, and so they went looking for him and they found him, and he was living a life in Tamworth in the country of New South Wales. And he was told that we had been taken and put into care. And so we ended up meeting him one day, and it was just a surreal moment, because for most of my childhood, I'd really believed that he had gone and that I'd never get that opportunity. And it almost felt surreal in the sense that when I looked at him, I wanted to make sure that it was him, because I'd only remembered photos of him. I was so young when he left, that I'd really patchy memory of him from that age. And he had dreadlocks at the time, so he had long hair, he had dreadlocks. When I saw him, he was a man with shaved head, so he had no hair. And at first, I thought this man is like pranking us. It felt like a joke. I was like, this can't be dad. But it was. And he worked really hard against the system to get, 3 of his boys out. And we ended up getting out of foster care. My dad went sober. He was, an alcoholic, and he struggled with his own alcoholism. And he ended up getting sober and working for years to get us out of the care system. And then we moved to Tamworth once we'd finished foster care, and lived with him for a number of years. And unfortunately, he relapsed. It's a struggle with when you have a lifelong addiction, and your parents, his dad was an alcoholic as well, and really struggled with alcohol to the point that it killed him. He died from alcohol poisoning, because he was drinking so much alcohol that he ended up drinking methylated spirits, mixing terps, basically, they call it. So it was, a really deep ingrained issue in my dad's family, alcoholism. And my dad, succumbed to that and relapsed. And once he had relapsed, I sort of realized that we might be going down the same road that we went down with my mum. And I, as a 14-year-old kid, wanted an escape. So I wrote a letter to a boarding school in Sydney, which is such a random thing to do as a kid. And there was this boarding school's exposition happening in the Tamworth Town Hall. And I remember I walked in with an old lady that used to sort of mentor me in a way. She was an old Christian lady who I always attached myself to, because I didn't have a mother figure around, and I knew that she was a safe person. And so we went to this boarding school's exposition, and all the boarding schools from Sydney were on display. They were sort of exhibiting to the rich farmers around the town, for them to send their kids. And the Shore School was the first school that I saw, and I saw the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge on a flyer, and I was like, I want to go to this school. I really want this opportunity, to get away from the lifestyle that I could see, that was currently occurring in my life. And I wasn't enjoying the school that I was at. It was a really sort of rough school in Tamworth. I always say it's almost like you needed a fighting degree before you got there, because like there was just fights all the time. And it was, it was a tough place to exist as a young person. So I wanted out, and I was looking for an opportunity. So I wrote this letter to the school. On the day, they said that they didn't accept, they didn't have any scholarships for First Nations kids. And they'd never had one before. So I wrote them a letter, and they got back to us and they said no. And then 6 months later, they obviously had changed their mind, and they made contact, and they said, we'd like to fly Matt to Sydney and meet with him. We've never done this before, but we've never had an Indigenous kid at this school ever. The fees were $40,000 a year. It was just, something that we couldn't afford. Not many people can. And I went down to Sydney, and I did a speech in front of the school board, which was about, a group of old white men as a 14-year-old kid. And I was so scared, but I wrote this speech as to why I wanted this opportunity. And then I went away, and the headmaster of that school flew to Tamworth, checked out, where I was from, made the effort to come and meet my family and sign off on a scholarship. And so I got a 4-year scholarship to the Shaw School in Sydney, and that's where my life changed because I was able to change my environment. And the discipline and the structure and the education, the connections, the worldview, that how my worldview changed. It was all pretty quick. I came from poverty. I would call it poverty. I was with my dad, as much as he was trying hard to make things work and happen, he was struggling as a single father. And sometimes there wasn't food on the table, or sometimes we'd go to school without lunches and we'd have to steal out the kids' lunches. It was a pretty tough existence in terms of like trying to survive as a young person. But when I got to this school, it was the opposite end. It was the richest kids in the country. It was discipline. It was structure. It was you couldn't have your hair touch your ears. There were so many things that were just not in my world before. And so I really got taken from one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of life experience. And I think that that's what's created me as a person, today. And after graduating from Shaw, the connections that I made at Shaw actually were the connections that opened up the entertainment industry for me in terms of the doors to the keys to the industry. It's all about connections and relationships that you build in life, I believe. So yeah, that schooling opportunity really allowed for me to have a different outcome than people who would have been in my circumstances. So that's sort of how I got into the entertainment industry as well. Now I'm a TV presenter for SBS and NITV. I do the entertainment slate there, so really focusing on First Nations entertainment, joy. I think that First Nations joy is important to show because for so many years and what we've seen on social media and mainstream TV is the deficit of my people or stereotypes. So for me, there's a real focus on showing the joy of my community and the talent and the skills. And then I also do some hosting on Channel 9 on Getaway. It's, a great show that I did the exact same thing that I did for sure. I wrote them a letter and I said, I've watched this show on a Thursday night. I looked and did some research online. Over the 32 years this show has been on air, they've never had a First Nations presenter. And this was in 2020. And, they'd never had a First Nations presenter on a travel show that was so iconic in this country. And so I asked them for an opportunity and I went and met with the team, exactly what I did, with the Shore opportunity. There's a tenacious little bug in me that's like not afraid, and I'm grateful for that. But I think it comes from being, a resilient person from my experiences, but also not afraid to get a no, you know. I'm not afraid. I don't. If they say no, what's the worst that can happen? So I've always tried to push down barriers and doors since graduating from school and university for representation for First Nations people, and I feel like that's my place in the industry right now, is trying to cut through for the mob. It's like there's so much more happening for us right now, and it's really exciting time for First Nations creatives. But when I was growing up, there wasn't anyone that I could really see in the media that made me feel like I saw myself. So I want to be that for my nieces and nephews and for the community. And but there's so much more now. There's so many more people that are doing amazing things, and there's so much more access. There is progress, and that's exciting. So yeah, I feel like I'm at a really interesting time in my career too, because I'm have my own podcast, which I've won an ACRA for, and using my voice as a First Nations person is what I'll continue to do, even though the referendum didn't sit in that space of telling us that we should. But yeah, that's sort of where I've landed after going through quite a lot.
If you're looking to make a change, to lose weight, to get toned, to gain self-confidence, all in just 24 minutes a day, then go no further. You can check out the Move Your Mind community by going to nickbrax.start.page. It's a lot. Well, thank you for sharing, mate. And I'm so glad to learn, that story about you. And that's incredible. And I mean, I love the message there about just going and, putting yourself out there, not waiting for things to happen.
Yeah.
And, you see that in so many walks of life. Like we can fall into that mindset of and you, like you're saying, you've come from almost poverty.
Mm.
Whatever there's varying levels of what everyone struggles with, but we
Yeah.
can easily fall into a victim mindset and blaming things. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be empathetic and
Mm.
try and help each other, but to actually make a change in your life and in other people's lives, we need to take action, and we need
Yeah.
to put yourself out there. And that's super inspiring. What
Yeah.
you're talking about there, like, if you didn't write that letter, you
Mm.
wouldn't be where you are today doing all of these amazing things. And it's gone
Yeah.
full circle where you're now, advocating, and you're a leader for First Nations people. And it's just such an
Yeah.
inspiring story. So I think it's just something that we all need to hear.
Thank you. I definitely, like, at the moment I'm trying to encourage people close to me about that action, you know. It's like, and not having that victim mindset. I was just home on the weekend in Tamworth, and there's an energy that sort of takes me back to the life that I had before in that space. And I definitely feel like there is a lack of um there's a lack of encouragement, but there's also just, a mindset shift that needs to happen in communities that you feel that heaviness in. Like, it's interesting because when I'm in Sydney and when I'm living my life that I've created after making a million choices to get here in the right direction, or sometimes in the wrong direction and having to pull yourself back in, I've realized how different my life is compared to the people that I grew up around, or the
Mm.
family members that are still, in the same community, similar environments. And I'm not saying that those places, there's anything wrong with those places. I'm just saying it's a difficult, much more difficult life. And I feel that when I'm home, I can get dragged back into that mindset really easily. It's
Yeah,
almost
wow.
like I feel the heaviness of the energy around me, and I feel like it can be the smallest things. It could be what I eat. It could
Mm.
be the lack of self-care that happens when I'm in those communities. And it's almost like I feel like it brings me down,
Yeah.
you know? It's a tough place to exist in when you have that mindset. And I see it so often in my community back home.
It's a tough thing, yeah, because
Mm.
we get dragged into whatever energies around you. And I guess, like the saying, we become a product of the people we spend our time with, or what environment we put
Totally.
ourselves in. And it
Yeah.
really is so true. And you sort of, it can be scary, like you're saying, how quickly that can happen. And often you don't even notice the shift that
Yeah.
can be so subtle, but it can change so many things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you're
Mm.
saying there. And what I'm interested in your story as well is, you've come through all of these hardships. I mean, the story with your dad, I can't even imagine.
Mm.
Um, that whole process of thinking he was dead for all of those years, finding out
Yeah.
he's alive, and so you've taken initiative and created this life for yourself. What's been the guiding sort of light for you? Have you had a mentor through that process? Has it been your own self belief? Have you lent on other
Mm.
people? What gave you the strength to go down that path? And
Yeah.
what did you lean on, I guess, to do it?
I always remember having something that was always in the back of my mind. It was almost like an internal thought that the circumstances that I was facing as a young person were always going to be temporary. I always felt that if I got to a certain age, and this may not be the case for everyone, but I felt like I had this inner belief that if I can just get through my childhood, through these tough circumstances, I can then make the decisions when I'm older, of where I want to go in life and what I want to do. And I always had that, I don't know, that belief that I would get through it and it was going to be temporary, especially when I was really young. I can remember believing that, the hard times, or, going without wasn't always going to be the case. I remember thinking, at some point you get to decide what happens in your life. And I was really excited for those moments. But I think, you know, I think one thing that I've started to realize is that life is just made up. We are, as human beings, and who we are, we're made up of all these small little choices that we've made. It's like that's what life is. It's choice after choice. And those choices can take us in so many different roads and down different paths. And um, I an idea that I've had recently is about helping kids with choice and understanding that, you need to um, allow kids to, make right or wrong choices. But an idea that I have creatively is to create a book about choice for kids and about
Mm.
understanding that each choice that we make leads us to a certain destination, and I try and instill that in my nieces and nephews now, because I'm like, when I think about how I got here, it wasn't that it all happened at once. It was small little choices along the way. And sometimes these choices might have, led me down the wrong path for a little while, and then I turned around. But I think also those hardships and those sort of failure moments are important, to know, to steer you back on the right path. But I really believe that, like, understanding that we all get to make a choice, and we all get to sort of drive and have the steering wheel of our own lives.
Yeah.
Self-determination is so important, especially in my community. I feel that so many people feel bogged down by just the status quo, what they perceive that they should be doing, but what people perceive they should be doing. Or, in my communities back home, I always just see the people doing the same thing. It's like, whether they're quitting school early or having kids early, or, unfortunately, like, they don't have that drive to get out and about and create something for themselves and create joy. Joy is really important. Like, my brothers at the moment, um, are struggling with that. They don't have much joy in their life. And it's because I think they're in the cycle of that heaviness, that environment that they've never been able to escape, and I feel like these are big issues, and they need big solutions, and you need to sometimes take yourself out. Like, I was even saying to my brother, I was like, maybe it's time to leave the town. Your mindset is drowning in what you've always known, what you've always seen. So it's like,
Yeah.
how do you shift that? Maybe it's a big change, like a location change. Maybe it's, what do you love to do? You love to fish, you love to be out on country, you love to hunt. Maybe it's about, like, doing that more often, and putting yourself in the environments that make you happy. you know I don't know, I think that, yeah, at the moment, there's I said to my partner, I said, I preserve myself a lot, by staying away, unfortunately,
Yeah.
from what I experienced as a young kid. Sometimes that's self-preservation, um, and I think that that's important as well. Like, knowing your boundaries.
Yeah.
How
Absolutely.
much can you take? And this time when I was home, it was 2 days, and that was enough. 2 days.
Yeah.
So, yeah, boundaries are important, I think, as well. Yeah.
Mate, so many incredible points in there. Yeah, having those boundaries. I know, in my own life, my biggest issue is being a people pleaser,
Oh yeah,
and
same.
yep, I'm a
Yeah.
sort of I don't even know if I'd say in recovery. I'm still managing the people pleasing,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the boundaries are so important, and it can be tough. But you become aware, I guess, as time goes on, that it's as much in life about what you say no to and what you don't allow in, as it is with what you actually go and do, because you won't have the space to do things and make clear decisions if you're, like you're saying, these examples, you're so bogged down, you're so stuck in it that
Yeah.
you don't even know how to get out. And you see this in mental health, people that are suffering, they're so stuck. And
Yeah.
it's a similar sort of thing where it's like, well, we know what we should do. You need to go get moving, exercise,
Yeah.
therapy, do things that are healthy for you, but it's so hard to do when you're stuck in that.
Yeah.
But we need to. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's so important.
The environment stuff that I was talking about and being stuck, I have a really, like, decent health and wellness lifestyle, in Sydney. I'm at the gym every day. I'm walking in the park across the road from my house every morning. I eat pretty well. As soon as I take myself to the environment, that I'm triggered in, it can be really tough. So, for instance, when I'm home, the first thing I feel like eating is fast food, like, back in Tamworth, fast
Mm.
food. Do I feel like going to the gym? Absolutely not. Do I, in Sydney, if I wanted food and there was a shop across the road, I would walk. In Tamworth, it's like, no, you got to get in the car and drive. There are so many polar opposites that happen in that environment. And I think it's it's like it has this control of your psychology or mentality. It's just a completely different experience for me, and realizing that has been super powerful because I have to make sure that when I'm going in there I'm prepared. I'm like, okay, I know what happens when I'm back home.
Yeah,
And then implementing and doing things that you might not feel like doing is sometimes the best option, you know. You don't feel like going to the gym, but it's like you should. Yeah, you don't
100%, mate.
feel like eating well, but if you eat well, you're not going to feel sluggish and you're not going to be lazy all afternoon,
Yeah,
you know?
no,
So,
it's critical. No,
yeah.
I think it's so important for people to hear because we often put too much pressure on ourselves and think we should just be able to deal with anything and get
Mm,
to a point where we won't get triggered by things. But I don't think that's possible. I don't think we ever
no.
and there's no perfect solution to anything, but I think that can be such a setback. And I know
Mm,
for myself, I've had to remove certain people from my life and people that
yeah.
I had a lot of negative people around me in the past. And if I'm around that too much again, I can slip into a mental hole so quickly.
Hmm.
And it's so crazy. So like you're saying there, just becoming aware of these things so you can protect your peace of mind. Because really, if you lose that, then like you're saying, you fall into, well, okay, I don't feel like going to the gym anymore. I
Hmm.
don't want to eat healthy anymore. I don't.
Yeah.
It can fall apart so quickly. So it's just
Yeah.
that maintenance of what what can I allow in and what doesn't
Yeah.
work for me, and it's a continual trial and error to find
Mhm.
what works for
Yeah.
each individual.
And I think I had a moment where I realized like what when I go back to that whole choice moment, it's like I had 110 days sober, and I realized that to get to that point and the mental clarity that I had, I remember I was walking with my partner on the street, and I turned to him and I said, "You know, I've never felt this happy. I've
Mm.
never felt this light." And to get to that point, there were all these choices that needed to be made, like removing people that weren't good for me or my mental health, and and making the hard choices that maybe in the moment you don't recognize as a positive impact, or you see, you don't see the benefits straight away, but 100 days after, it's like, wow, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
there was so I'm a people pleaser. I'm such a person who wants people to feel great as well, and I never want to hurt anyone. So
yeah,
I struggle with the idea of cutting people who you might love and enjoy their company out of your life, but they don't bring a positive. They don't bring anything, not anything, but they sometimes can bring you down, or they can bring negative things into your life. Whether that's the friend who is always wanting you to go out and have a drink, and you're a good friend with them, but is there anything beyond that? You got to test the waters. Is there
yeah,
anything beyond that relationship other than just going out and having a drink? If we can't go out and have a drink, and if you don't want to catch up any other time, is this really a friendship? It's like it's an assessment you got to make. um
exactly. And
yeah.
and if they're going to make you, give you a hard time for putting up a boundary, saying no, I don't want to get a drink, but
Yeah.
you want to do this. If they're going to make you feel bad about that, they're probably not a friend.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy thing as a people pleaser. There's this, guilt and shame and fear of letting these people down. But I was talking to my girlfriend about it recently, and it's so strange because it's like, well, she was like making a point to me, you're willing to go and do all these things in the past for these people,
Yeah.
but like, what about the people actually that you love and care about that are close? Sometimes at the expense of time you could be spending with them, you're going and doing these things that you don't even want to do for people who
Yeah.
probably don't give a fuck about you as well because they're not a
Yeah.
proper friend, but you're feeling this guilt attached to it.
Yeah.
So it's like realizing that you can't please everyone, so you got to
Mm.
pick and choose, where
Yeah.
you put your time.
I totally agree with that. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the episode was called Tell Them. And it was the tell them theory of, instead of holding back, telling people how you really feel. Or, I'm someone who will go to if someone invites me to something, I will go to it because I don't want to hurt their feelings. But
Mm.
internally I'm like, I don't want to go. And it's like, instead of going, you should just tell them, hey, I don't feel like I want to go, or because of this reason. Or you just, you should just tell them, instead of putting yourself through the anxiety of thinking, oh, well, I might pull out really late, you know? So it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, there's just something that I've learned recently. Like the other day, I played touch football on a Wednesday night, and the whole team was going to drinks after, well, dinner and drinks. And I was like, oh, okay. So my leg was hurting a little bit, and I was thinking, oh, I can use this as an excuse not to go, like trying to figure out how I could not go to the dinner and drinks after the game, but not hurt anyone's feelings. When in reality, if I just said, hey guys, I'm going to go home, no one's really going to, care that much in this scenario. But in your head, you build it up to be this big moment that is like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to let everyone down because I'm the only one in the team not going. But the reason I'm not going is because I don't want to be at a pub, you
Yes.
know?
100%. 100%.
So it's,
That was,
yeah. Mm.
I mean, I had the thing that made me stop the drinking because I'd wanted to stop for a while, and I was in New York, and I had this business contact slash friend from Australia coming over, and he was, all excited, saying, I'm there for a couple of nights, and you live there, where are we going to go, blah blah blah. And I really didn't want to drink, but I had this whole anxiety before it, thinking, but this, I don't want to deny this guy of this experience, and I want to take him to these
Yeah.
places, and
Yeah.
he's probably going to want the experience of drinking with me and doing,
Yes.
the stuff. And so we end up going to all these dive bars, and have ends up being just this, this huge night out. And I wake
Yeah.
up, can barely remember getting home, and I was,
Yeah.
that was the when that happened, I thought, okay, this is enough's enough. What the hell? Why have I done this? This guy, probably just didn't have any expectation about what we were meant to do, but I built this whole story in my head, and
Yeah.
then did all this, behavior that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how often we do things like that. And
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
interested to, I guess, with you when you had that experience of the 110 days not drinking. What were some of the things that you learnt through that process, and what were some of the initial obstacles that were difficult?
I think when I have a goal, or if I have, for instance, what really helped me in the beginning was a work goal. So I was doing a big project for 7 weeks, and in the lead up to that, it was the sort of the biggest project of my career, and I really wanted to do a good job. So I had this moment that I was leaning on as help, and I remember it was like maybe 2 months out of that project that I started. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to drink because I really want to be clear for this project. So for me, having something in the future, whether it's a job or a holiday can be tricky though, because you think to yourself, I won't drink until I get to the holiday. The holiday becomes the drinking part. So that can be tricky. But for me, a goal really helps, seeing something in the future. And that job was so important to me that in my dreams are really important to me, that I always feel like if I'm starting to sacrifice or risk the job, then I start to really pull my head in. I've realized how important my work is to me, and I
Yeah,
think that taking that mindset of, oh, the work is really important, and actually popping that mindset into, no, you're really important. You are important. Your health is important. Your future is important. Having that sort of come over into that space has been super helpful for me. So instead of just seeing a work opportunity as a reason to stop this or stop that, or get fit, or stay on track, it's like you have to see yourself as that opportunity. And I
yeah,
found that as soon as along the process, actually, within that 110 days, things, when you start, I suppose, aligning with your own values and not compromising, the amount of stuff that comes to you instead of you having to go out and seek it, I found was
mm,
astounding. Like, I found that when I was at that point of being really happy, clear, um, and really feeling everything, feeling my emotions, because I've been blocked up for a long time. I had
mm,
my brother was murdered in 2022, and since that moment he was 32 years old, and since that moment I've been really blocked, really numb, really struggling with feeling. And I did a lot of therapy around it. So I did a year of, every Friday I was at therapy, 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 therapy. It got me through a lot. But I think the sobriety stint really made me feel again. So I
Mm.
wasn't numbing myself. I felt like I wasn't trying to escape. I was actually feeling everything. And I also found that my work improved. So even though that job that happened, which I can't speak about, it's one of those weird ones that you can't really talk about. Um, I'm not a spy. Don't worry. Every time I say it, so like someone, I'm like, I'm not a spy. Promise.
Yeah.
Um, but so I found that I was way more productive, less anxious, and really good at my job. When I'm emceeing something and when I was like in that stint of being sober, everything was so clear. I
Yeah.
remember feeling like I'm really in this conversation. If I was hosting a panel, I felt like I was digesting everything they were saying. And I remember in the past the lack of clarity. It's almost like you listen to the last bit and then you just tail off the end, of that sentence instead of really being engaged. So there were so many benefits to that, and I really want to get back there. And I know that I'm preparing myself mentally to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And sorry to hear about your brother. I mean, I can't even imagine,
Yeah.
wow, you've
Crazy,
been,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah,
It
huge.
was a really I was actually out drinking and partying in a nightclub, and it was midnight, and I was on the dance floor and I was drunk. I was pretty tanked that night at a club, and I got a phone call from my younger brother saying that my older brother had been stabbed, and it was a really like I mean, sobering if you want to use that term, but it's like I remember just snapping out of that drunken state and being very, um, like it was almost like a dream state. When you find out news like that, it's like, is this
Yeah.
real? Am I going to wake up? And that was a really tough time for my whole family. My dad lost 35 kilos. He was down to 48 kilos as a 6 foot man, skin and bone. He was in
Wow.
hospital. He's speaking of environment, my dad recently, I moved him from a place where he was living, where we lived as kids, out of that house, which my brother also lived in with him, and into a new house. And just that change of environment, me helping him out in that situation, uh, it changed his whole life. He stopped. He stopped smoking marijuana. He stopped smoking cigarettes as a 66-year-old man. He's quit both of those things, and he's put on 30 kilos
Mm. Wow. That's
in
crazy.
6 months, man. Like
My
it's
God.
it's so like his whole life when I was home, when saw him, and he looks like he's 20 years younger. It's a
Yeah.
change of environment that he needed. He needed to be taken out of that place that he had so much trauma in, and just no one can survive in a place like that with what he was living. But just the change of environment, just it's like he now looks alive.
Yeah.
It's insane. But yeah, so my family have gone through a lot in the last 2 years, and I think I did a lot of therapy, so I've started to process it. But it
Yeah.
definitely, when you have someone that close to you taken in that way, it really is surreal. You can't. I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but it's one of those things that it's hard to accept. It's really hard. Yeah.
I can't even imagine, mate. Something
Mm.
like that. Yeah, exactly. You'd go into shock, I imagine, and
Yeah.
it would, yeah, so hard to process, so left of center to
Yeah.
have something like that happen. So yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So what
Yeah.
would I think all of this, I love like all of the thread through your story, I guess, of changing your environment, taking action.
Mm.
The resilience that you've, I think, naturally had from what you're saying there. Of even way back when you were first writing that letter, it sounds like it's always been, I'm gonna build that positivity. I can get through anything because I
Mm.
know that things are going to get better. I'm going to create a better future for myself. I'm going to
Yeah.
hunt down that opportunity. I'm not going to wait for it to be given to me.
Yeah.
So I think there's just so much for anyone listening to this to learn. I know our listeners will take so much out of this. A lot of our listeners also are, stuck, whether that's in a state where they're, depressed, they don't know how to get out of it, whether it's just in a job and they want to, take the leap to go and start a business or whatever it
Yeah.
is. What,
Yeah.
what would you say to any of our listeners that are feeling just stuck in that state? What advice could you give from
Mhm.
your own experience?
Yeah, what I've realized is that if you have an idea or a thought and it constantly comes back to you, you have to act on it. That's meant for you. And I've always felt like the so I think when you're more in tune with yourself, you can feel that sort of where you need to go more easily. But for me, I have this weird thing, and I don't know if it's called manifestation, but if I'm thinking of something, like if it can be the slightest example of I want to host, I want to host the ARIA Awards. And if that thought keeps on coming to my mind, I know that it's a job that I need to act on, It's like an idea that is meant for me, a job that's meant for me, and I need to send an email or take action on it. And I feel like every time that I haven't done that, I found out that the people who were working for that were thinking of me for the job. So
Wow.
it's like it's always a moment of like I should have. So whenever I have creative ideas, or not all of them, but whenever something is coming to me more than once and often, I always act on it. And I think that that's important, because it doesn't matter if we get a no, but I think that putting it out there and being proactive in our lives, and being making sure that we're the driver of the wheel, we're in the direction that we want to go, we're walking in the direction we want to go, like take action, because so many things are for us, but we just don't take that initiative to reach out. And I think it sometimes can come down to that we have self-doubt and we don't think we're good enough. But what I've realized is that my career is made up of opportunities because I've knocked on the doors. So when you
Yeah.
have that thought, or when you have that idea, or when you think I'd be good at that, or why don't they have that, maybe I should take that idea to them, do it.
Yeah.
It's There is no harm in getting a no. I think it's important sometimes to get a no. Some things aren't meant for us, but taking action on our lives and being proactive about what we want to achieve is like super important. And the one thing that has got me to where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you interested in joining a community of like-minded people who are on the same journey as you are? Even though you're the one that needs to do the work, you don't have to go it alone. You can find all of the information at nickbrax.start.page. Yeah, tuning into your gut, really listening to that, and
Yeah.
and taking action on it. And like you're saying, if you get a no,
Yeah.
you often learn as much, if not more, when we don't get what we want, when something
Mm.
goes wrong. There's so much learning in that, and so
Yeah.
much resilience to be built from it. And
Yeah.
I, yeah, the point about just following it, and like
Yeah.
you're saying, when you've had this idea that you've wanted to do something and you followed it, it's
Mm.
sort of, it sounds like a spiritual thing, but it's
Yeah.
really visualization, where because you're putting that out there and you're not knowing exactly how you'll do it, but you're like, okay, I'm going to make this happen. And then it's like what you were talking about with all of those tiny little steps that we take that lead up to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
They come about because we're putting that in our mind. If we tell ourselves
Yeah.
that no, that's not possible, you've killed it off before it can begin. You're not even going to take any of
Totally.
these steps towards it. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah,
I,
so important.
as I was saying before about the sobriety stint, I think when I was at the most clear, the most opportunities were coming. So it's like we're ready to
Yeah,
meet them. So I don't know what it
yeah,
is with the energy of the universe or whatever, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist and I'm not someone who sort of looks too much into that side of thing of even manifestation. But I do believe that when you're ready, things will come to you. That you're ready to take on. So sometimes the work can seem tedious, or like the journey is like, why am I doing this, or why am I putting myself through this for self-improvement? But to get to the next level, you'll get the next level opportunities as well. So it's like being prepared for what might come is important as well. So not disregarding all the work you're putting in because you're not seeing immediate results. you
yeah,
know
yeah.
um we're all building something, hopefully, towards something.
Fingers
So
crossed.
yeah.
100%,
Hopefully.
mate. Um, and I think the thing that we forget in the modern world, or people, are sort of distracted from now, is wanting, this quick fix. And we're looking at people on social media and comparing, and, people aren't a lot of the time willing to really commit and, make a choice, sacrifice, choose a path, be willing to fail, be willing to take time to get there.
Yeah.
And what we miss in all of that is, even if you could get things magically to happen overnight,
Mm.
where's the meaning? The meaning comes from having to fight for it, having to go through the
Totally.
hardship. You
Yeah.
value it then.
Yeah. I had an experience where an ex-partner of mine, I was in a long-term relationship for 6 years. We came from completely different walks of life. And a lot of the things that he had in life, in terms of a house, a car, the things that you dream of and the things that you work hard towards, were given to him, right? So
Mm.
his parents, and I think there's pros and cons to it. But what I realized is that when you get handed everything really easily, you don't have respect for the grind. You don't have respect for, or you don't value what you have, as much as somebody who has had to put in the work and really know that they can't fall back on anything. When you, especially when you're, a lone soldier and you don't have any backing, and you're out there and you're, the life that you build is off your back. You know that you don't have any inheritance per se in this scenario. Um, there's a different level of respect that you have for the things that you achieve, you know? So when things do get tough, or when things seem hard, I think that that is all like character building, for people who, who have to work hard. I think that there's a real positive aspect to that. Things that come easy, there's a lack of value for, or you don't really respect it as much. That's what I found.
I yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think it can be it's a negative thing if, if you're like, everyone wants to be in that position and have, the nice car or house or whatever. But if it
Mhm.
is just handed to you, yeah, there's no value in it. And it can
Yeah.
be as much of a curse as a blessing, like you're saying there. And we
Yeah.
don't learn to really value things. And, I can relate to it in my own life. When I was in
Mm.
my early 20s, I um, had things come to me very easily, and I was, grew up in a well-known family, and all of these things happened that at a time when I was very insecure and didn't really know what I wanted, and I was on
Mm.
TV shows and getting attention, and then I felt like things should just be easy then, and it sort of set
Mm.
me back, and it took falling flat on my face to, really learn and pick myself back up what I truly cared about. And I'm so grateful, I had
Yeah.
that happen, because
Yeah.
otherwise I probably wouldn't have come through it. But I think it's a gift to struggle, to
Yeah.
come, if you can come through it, because I think that's where the meaning in life comes from.
Yeah, I agree. I think even when I'm talking about my own life when I was
Sorry.
younger, I think that, when I was younger, I wouldn't take anything back. And people say that all the time, but I think that those challenging times created who I am. And I feel really, um, I don't know, grateful for all the experiences that I've gone through. And I feel like life for me there is a currency of life, and it's like, the experiences that you go through, and I find that this is like something that I've tried to tell myself, is that you don't go through tough experiences for no reason. You go through challenges so that you can use them. And it's like there is this currency of, the challenges seem hard, but it is those moments that are going to create a stronger individual, or a better person. So for me, I've always felt like, yeah, the tough challenges or the struggles, they're actually like, the parts of life that make it, worth it, because without the lows we don't get the highs. I always think this about my career as well. Like, I think you probably resonate with this, but there are moments in your career that you sort of put on a pedestal, or there are like goals or achievements that you think, once you get there, you will feel a certain way. And it just isn't the case. You know, it's like, I've wanted so many, like, there are so many things that I've ticked off in my career that I always felt like if I got there, I will feel like I've made it. And it's just not it, and I don't think anyone who has success has that feeling that they've made it when they get to a certain part of their career. I really believe that it's all the moments along the way that are the gold, and that's about being present. So it's like, instead of thinking that, oh, once I get here, I'm gonna feel fulfilled, happy, and like I've made it. It's like, actually no, all the little experiences along the way are the moments that you should be treasuring, because it just doesn't feel like that. And I haven't had major success. I'm not saying that, like, if I got to win an Oscar one day, that I wouldn't feel like, oh wow, that's amazing. But what I'm saying is that I just don't think that success and sometimes I want to call them superficial moments in this industry, they just don't fulfill you the way that you might have once thought it would.
100%. And
Mm,
I couldn't relate more with you on that, and probably a lot of
mm,
the stuff you're talking about here. But,
mm,
I still struggle with that to this day. And again,
mm,
talking to my girlfriend all the time, and she's always
mm.
saying the exact advice of what you were just saying there of,
Yeah,
nothing's going to make you feel, you're never going to feel like you've arrived somewhere, or that, life's going to, if you can't learn to just be happy with the journey, enjoy life now, you won't
yeah,
feel any better. But, for me, I've always set a new bar and had
yeah.
these things in my life happen that I wanted to have happen, but then it becomes the next thing. And I'm trying
That's
to get
right.
like a TV series made at the moment. And then I tell
Mm,
myself, okay, once that's made, and then if that's a success, then maybe I can feel like I'm worthy. And, then I can
mm.
have these other things hopefully happen. And it's like, well, I think it's good. You need to still have that ambition, but realize
Yeah,
that that's not what defines us. And we can only control so much, so we've got to,
yeah,
like you're saying, learn from embrace the process, be present, and learn from what we're doing.
yeah. I think that I was listening to something the other day where they were talking about the highs and lows of life, but then forgetting the middle parts. And it's like, oh, it was a podcast with Shawn Mendes and about the making of a new album. But it was, he was always waiting on the high moments, which was the show. He was always waiting to get to the show and only thinking that that was the only worthy part of the day. If I can get there and get that done, then I'm great. And it's like
Mm,
he missed out on so much of the day. It's like, and I think it's a good metaphor for everyone. It's like, be present, open your
it's so
eyes. I
interesting.
always think to
Yeah.
myself when I'm walking, I live across the road from a massive park. The small things in the day that can make you feel really present, and one of them is looking up. If you look up, I find that it's a completely different view that we're not used to. It's to the canopies of these trees across the road from my apartment. It makes me feel really small, but in a great way, and it
Mm,
makes me feel really present. Like I'm here. I'm walking amongst these beautiful trees. It's just like a different perspective. We're so used to being our heads in our phone or heads down that, like, for me, a little tip for those I don't know who like being outdoors and walking is look up.
yeah.
It can make you feel really present. That's what I found. Yeah.
No, I love that, mate. It is
Mm,
such an important reminder because we look up to these, whether it's successful um, personalities or
mm,
celebrities or whatever. But I mean, there's so many of them that get to that level and have drug problems or
mm, yeah.
end up having an overdose or whatever it is. So
Mm,
it's like clearly not the solution. It's good
yeah.
to. It's just like it's a hard thing to reconcile in your mind, but it's
Yeah.
it's almost like we can't accept that the letting go of control of it's okay to be just happy now and be present and let life
Mm,
happen. Like you're saying, all the little things, they're the things that make up life. Going and having a coffee in the morning, going
yeah.
for a walk, all these little things. That's really the important parts of life. But
Yeah.
I think we live in a world that makes it very hard for us uh, to remember that.
Oh yeah, totally. And even this industry, the superficiality of entertainment. And I'm someone who loves entertainment. I love a shiny floor show. The dream one day is to host one, be one of the First Nations people to host a shiny floor show in Australia. That's, my world of entertainment is escapism, but it's
Yeah,
not real. We need to remember it's not real. The things that not all that, glitters is gold. It's like, it's one of those things that for me, entertainment has been escape. It's been my love. It's been my dream. But it also is not real. The real things are what are in our home, in our lounge room. The real people who are our partners, our relationships that get us through the hard times. So I think the industry has all from when I was younger has always
Mm.
been a bit of I've had to really check myself sometimes and know that, this
Yeah.
is especially the things that people make you feel are important, like attention. People make you feel that the more attention the more attention you get, the better you are. It's like I
E-
think as I grow, I
Yeah.
become more aware of how much little attention I want.
Yeah.
I think you don't realize until even being invited to events and things that you feel like, oh, if I don't go, I'm going to be forgotten. It's like it's changing your mind around those things. So it's like, no, you know, um, it's putting that pressure, like alleviating that pressure. Um, I've had to do that recently because I remember in my early 20s, I was like, I have to be at everything, have to be seen at everything, I have to do everything that my agent sends me, have to say yes, 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 yes. And it's like, it's just not the case.
Not at
Yeah.
all. Exactly.
No.
It's and no,
Yeah.
again, it relates so much to that. And I,
Yeah.
had a period in my 20s where I was going to all the different events, and
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about, basing my worth and feeling like I needed to have that attention, needed to be at a certain status to feel like I was worthy. And you're buying into this hierarchy, and everyone else in the industry is doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
uh, for me, removing from that, and I think having, I don't know, for you, I'm interested to ask
Mm,
you about that as well, but for
mm,
me, having a really amazing relationship with my partner and having that
mm.
groundedness that comes from it means,
Yeah.
and just having other parts of my life and myself, grounded means then I can look at it and be like, okay, the acting stuff I'm doing because I genuinely want to do it now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to happen in any certain way. And I can actually feel calm and enjoy it and
Yeah.
do it quickly rather than just feeling on edge and being anxious and trying to prove a point. Have you found like having your relationship and things like that have helped you with, navigating the industry as well?
Mm. I was just talking to a friend last night about this, actually, about my relationship, and I was saying it's so much easier when you have a supportive partner.
Yeah.
I've always been someone who not needs companionship, but I always felt like being in a relationship has always helped me feel secure and safe and stable. And that's something that, I've had to work on feeling on my own as well. It's you can't depend on your partner for that. But when you have a partner who aligns with, for instance, my partner is really aligned with this sober lifestyle. So
Yeah.
for me, understanding that my partner is supportive in that way is so big. I think it's in the past it wasn't like that. There was a lot of judgment. In past relationships, there was a lot of judgment, especially when it came to failure. There was, oh, but you said you were going to do this. You said you were going to do that. There was no room for, oh, I know I said this, but I said I wasn't going to drink, but then I ended up drinking, and there was just a lot of judgment around it. So having a partner who really supports me with that, which has to be the priority in my life if I want to break the cycle, and that
Yeah.
comes with the events. If I don't feel confident enough to go to an event because I feel like I might drink, for instance, in the next month, I have 3 award shows. I have the ARIA Awards, the Australian Podcast Awards, and the TikTok Awards. So last year at the Arias, I said I wasn't going to drink, and I went and I drank, and I didn't get home until 5 a.m. Everything went out the
Mm.
window. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even at that event, I held off until I didn't have my first drink until 10 p.m. Like
Yeah.
ridiculous. I was so strong. I was getting through the night, and then all of a sudden, temptation comes,
Yeah.
and it all went out the window. And I feel like why I'm comparing these moments is because last year I didn't have my partner and I weren't in the in the dynamic that we are in now. We were just getting to know each other, but now I feel really supported by my partner that we can check in with each other on message. How's it going? How you
Mm.
feeling? he'll be here. I know that there's a sense of accountability coming home, at a certain time. All that stuff really helps me. So I think having supportive people around you, and also knowing the people that you probably shouldn't, be having in your life at this moment. I've got so many friends who are just party friends, who that
Yeah.
if I text or if I call, the party's on, and and they're always doing it. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's I've got those people who I've had to really have boundaries with. And they're not people who I don't like. They're actually long-term friends. But they have to stay at arm's width, because I read something that said your sobriety has to be a number one priority. And no matter
Yeah.
what comes in, it can be the biggest temptation. You just have to always put your sobriety above it. And it's not easy to do, but that comes down to relationships as well.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at NickBrax. I really appreciate your ongoing support. 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. Couldn't
Yeah.
agree more, mate. And I think, I love that relationship that you've got, that you're describing. And like you're talking about there's no way I could have quit drinking if it wasn't for my partner. She was
Yeah.
encouraging me and, really sort of, being honest with me and being there for me. And it makes all the difference. So I think it
It
really is
does.
such an important thing. So,
Yeah, and the lack of judgment has really helped me. Like, he even said to me
yeah,
the other day, he said, "You know what?" He said, "If you go out and you want to have a drink, I'll be here and I'll be waiting for you, and I'll take care of you. But
yeah,
do it here." But he was like, in the sense that we had a disagreement, and instead of doing it after a disagreement and being like, okay, I'm going to go out and let my hair down and have a drink after a disagreement, he was like, you know what, if you really want to do that, do it when you're happy. Don't do it when you're you know when you're upset, because I think then that opens the floodgates to all other things, you know what I mean? So I just feel like he's been supportive in the sense that he hasn't been like, well, you need to not ever drink again.
yeah,
it's been like
yeah.
it's been like, I'm here to help you with where you want to go. And if you're telling me you don't want to drink, well, then let's go down that path, and I'm here to help you. But if you do have a drink, I'm not the person to, when you come home, go, told you weren't going to do it. So I think that's super important, having like that trust in your partner that they're not going to judge you, even if you fail.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That, support and
Yeah.
but unconditional as well, where,
Yeah.
they understand and they're nurturing with you and all that sort of thing. I think what you're describing
Yeah.
is so important. So it sounds like a keeper, mate. I think
Yeah. Yes, he is.
he sounds like it.
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, mate, I've loved this chat. I think, I could so many more topics I could talk to you about, but your
Thanks so
stories.
much.
No, story's incredible, mate, and thank you for being so open on here as well. We finish every episode with 5 closing questions, so these can just be quick
Yeah.
answers, whatever comes
Right.
to mind for you.
Yeah.
First one being, what do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Ooh. You know, when you ask that question, I specifically think about my community, and I think about two things, and I think about trauma, and I think about addiction, and I feel like those two things are such big barriers, to people having positive mental health, and I feel that in my community, trauma is big. There's so much intergenerational trauma that's handed down that really can mess with people's mental health. But then also addiction, because it's about numbing that trauma. So I feel like trauma and addiction, need to be major focuses when it comes to, mental health, and resources and funding that is needed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so
Counseling.
hard to break the cycle of it. It's
Mm.
such a difficult thing. So yeah, that's a huge one. Uh,
Mm.
what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind for you,
Oh, my best childhood memory. Hmm.
or one of?
Okay. Okay. Well, I have some. It's so weird to say this, but it's like when you ask me that, I think about all the bad stuff, you know. It's so weird. It's like you just asked me that, and all of a sudden, all the memories that came to my mind were like troublesome.
Mm.
That's it's an interesting. It's interesting for me to go back there. It's like
Yeah.
I remember as a young kid when I was very, very, very young. I would always just follow my mum around. You know, I would remember just being like a. The picture that I can give you is like my mum was the duck and we were the ducklings, and we'd just follow her, and we'd go
Yeah.
from house to house, and she would, drink with her friends and do whatever she needed to do. But I was always the little man who would be like tapping her on the shoulder, and I remember always being like, "It's time to go home now. It's time to go home." So there was always like there's a I don't know if this is the funnest. It's really not the funnest memory, but there's a memory of me always wanting to help.
Yeah.
Always wanted to help her. Even to the point where it was, me. I remember when I was really young and I stole her card. She had like a debit card, and I stole her card because I knew that she would buy drugs and alcohol with it.
Oh
So I ended
wow.
up hiding it, and I just knew what was right as a young kid. She couldn't have the card, she couldn't get the money, and then she might not be able to buy the things that she needed. So,
Yeah.
um, there's a lot, I don't know, a lot that happened as a kid, but let's think of a fun memory. A really fun memory was the first day that we were reunited with my dad. And
Yeah.
we ate donuts. We had donuts and we played soccer in the park at Parramatta. So
Love that.
that I have a photo of that, which is a really special memory. And it's the first day we saw him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so nice,
Yeah.
mate. And yeah, again, so we need your life can be made into a movie. I mean, there's so many levels to
Yeah.
it. It's
Yeah,
like
totally.
it's a
Totally.
crazy story. Um,
Yeah.
what would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
Mm. Feeling light. When I feel like, because I've gone through moments in my life where I feel really heavy, and it's really hard to find happiness in those moments. So when I'm feeling light and clear, um, and yeah, I feel like the feeling of happiness for me is when I'm feeling light.
Yeah,
The definition of happiness is alignment. When you feel like things, whether it's the sobriety side of things that is then aligning to the work side of things, that makes me really happy. So when you're feeling like everything's sort of aligning, yeah,
couldn't agree more. If
yeah.
you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
18. 18-year-old self flew to Perth at the end of school, and I went to
I
Wagga.
don't think you needed the advice, mate. You did made some good decisions.
Yeah, I think be yourself, you know?
Yeah,
Be
yeah,
yourself. Everyone else is taken. So
yeah.
just yeah, it's like I think I was as an 18-year-old I always felt like, oh, whether it was my queer identity or, not trying to hide my First Nations identity because of feeling judged. I feel like, no, just be yourself. Those things that I've come to realize are the best parts of myself. Yeah.
100%, 100%. Yeah, I love that. Well, final one. You've got plenty here that you could answer, but what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of. I really feel that the thing that I want to be most proud of is being an example for my nieces and nephews, and I want to be a dad one day. So I'm trying to figure it all out, and I'm not that you get to a point where then you can be good enough to be a parent. It's like I really want to get to a point where I feel like I can bring a kid into the world and give them what I didn't have. So I am on the journey to be a dad one day. And I feel like the thing that I'm most proud of will be to, be a good dad, be a good uncle, be a good dad, be a good example. Yeah.
Love it, mate. Well, great way to end, and thank you again for making the time. Final thing, where can
Yeah.
our listeners go? We'll put this in the show notes, but where can they go if
Great.
they want to find more about you?
Yeah, so I share a lot of personal stuff on my Instagram at It's Matty Mills. You can catch me on SBS and NITV if you're watching in Australia, on Getaway on Channel 9. And I have a podcast called First Things First Podcast, which we'd love to have you on. We'll have to figure out when we can do
Love
that.
to. Yeah.
On Nova. And we're actually nominated for Best Indigenous Podcast.
Thank you again, mate. Thank you again.
No, thanks. Have a great one. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Matty Mills, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or send a DM. Your feedback's always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.